meeting.public.gov. And you can catch council meetings live right here on Surprise 11. The Surprise Planning and Zoning Commission meets on the first Thursday of the month inside council chambers at Surprise City Hall. Meetings begin at 6 p.m. For meeting dates and links to the agenda, check out the city's main web calendar at surpriseaz.gov. You can catch all Planning and Zoning Commission meetings live right here on Surprise 11. Dial-A-Ride in Surprise is at your service. To schedule a ride weekdays from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., call 623-222-1622. Become a Surprise volunteer. There are plenty of opportunities to choose from. Training is provided and the hours are flexible. Call 623-222-1500 for more information. Surprise is proud to offer curbside recycling. Do your part by recycling the right way. If you use a blue recycle container, no bags, please. And for the black trash bin, please use a bag. And remember, it's a violation to block sidewalks. Place these bins on the street, wheels to the curb. If you find a beehive on your property, don't call 911 unless the bees pose a threat. Also, don't call the fire department. You will need to call a bee specialist or exterminator for safe removal. You can find them in the yellow pages. Help keep Surprise beautiful. Join the Adopt a Street program. Groups there work to pick up litter along 1-mile stretches of Surprise roadways at least 4 times a year. Training is required.
This council workshop to order. May we have roll call, please?
Mayor Truitt.
Here.
Vice Mayor Hall.
Here.
Councilmember Wolcott. Here. Councilmember Villanueva. Here. Councilmember Alton.
Here.
Councilmember Woodard.
Here.
Councilmember Williams. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go directly to the openness to the public, I believe. If there's anybody from the public like to speak on any agendized item, please step forward. Seeing no one, I close that and move to item number 1.
City Transit Program, discussion regarding fiscal year 2012 budget preparations.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This afternoon, I prepared a presentation which I would hope becomes a discussion, because we're looking for your information, your feedback regarding some of the alternatives that are available to us with the transit program for the next fiscal year and beyond. But what is expected is, if there is a strong indication or feeling of council that you would like us to consider in the next 2 months as we prepare the budget for next year, we'll include those either as an alternate, in an alternate basis, or if it's a clear direction, we'll include that as the preparation of the annual budget for transit. And as I go through this, please stop me for questions. At the end, we'll have a dedicated period for feedback, because I anticipate some comments and questions at that point, but feel free to, as the presentation goes on. The presentation portion is broken up into 4 different elements. The first is description of services, just to give an overview again of what transit services are provided our customers. Talk about performance measurement highlights, both what we track and also against what Valley Metro standards are. I have that information included in the presentation. Talk about what our current revenue and expenditures look like for each of the 4 different service categories, and then finally to seek your comments and direction. 4 services that are available include Dial-A-Ride, the Senior Center Transit, the Route 571 Express from Phoenix to Surprise, and the Rural Road 660. The transit services for Dial-A-Ride, for example, include services for residents over 16 years of age, and they're for medical, shopping, work-related trips within and outside the borders of Surprise. As part of that service, you may have heard ADA services by many paratransit organizations within the Valley. Because we have no fixed route schedule, we're not obligated to provide ADA service. However, we have a number of customers that are ADA certified, so we log those, and we're able to get reimbursement to the tune of about $15,000 a year back from Valley Metro through a federal grant program for a subsidy for that portion. So that is some money coming back to the general fund. Senior Center Transit provides seniors access to and from the senior center, and we'll get into talking about some of the programs that are available. The Route 571 Express, that basically consists of 3 outbound routes from Surprise in the morning and 3 inbound routes from Phoenix to Surprise in the afternoon. Rural Route 660 is a route from Arrowhead to Surprise and a few other stops, eventually out to Wickenburg. More specifically, as it relates to Dial-A-Ride, we have 4 basic trips that we track, and then another category would be other. Life-sustaining could be regular appointments, it could be pre-scheduled trips, general medical trips, shopping trips, work trips, and just the other category. The fares are $1 per ride within the city. If you travel outside the city, you're charged $1.25 currently. Hours of operation is Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Reservations can be taken during 8:30 to 12 and from 1:30 to 4. The staffing consists of...
Ask a question.
Sure.
Back on that last slide on the reservations, are those reservations taken, go back the other way. Reservations taken Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 12 and 1:30 to 4, is that for same-day service?
No, that is up to 3 weeks in advance.
Okay, do we take same-day reservations?
If there's space available, yes.
Okay.
But typically, that's referred to a denial. I'll get into that later. But it's usually the case that the bookings are occupied, so there isn't available.
So we do a 3-week out scheduling?
Correct. Up to 3 weeks out.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, 2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay, thank you.
Just as a, Sharon, that gentleman that was talking to us in the interview, when Bob followed up on it, they were same-day denials, I believe. Remember the gentleman?
He was calling typically the last day before or the day of the service, thinking it's more like a cab fare, when it's not that type of service, and we did not have a ride available for him.
Right.
Right.
Staffing level consists of 1 supervisor, 1.5 part-time, 1 full-time, 1 part-time dispatcher, and 7 drivers. There are 7 wheelchair vans that are wheelchair accessible. No, these are paid positions. In the DART program, they're all paid. The DART history over the past 5 years, you'll see a general trend line in trips increasing with a slight decrease in this past year, where the passenger level continues to increase from year to year. Now, the drop in the number of trips, we believe, is due to the grouping of passengers on same route trips. Either it could be a shopping trip that we will organize, and there'll be 4 people or 5 people on the van, or there could be medical trips that we're grouping appointments where possible. So we think that the number is, if you look at the total number of trips, we may be reaching the capacity of the present system in terms of riders, or in terms of drivers and vehicles, of what we're capable of delivering in terms of total number of trips. The distribution of trip types, what are they for? There's roughly 18,000, almost 19,000 total trips, and the trip types, life-sustaining represents 16%, medical is 24%, shopping is 26%, work is 26%, and other is 6%. So you'll see that through that, the medical portion of our total number of trips represent 40% of our total number of trips.
How many operating days do we have? Do you know that number?
Total of the year?
Yeah.
Well, I think you're off on the holidays. 250.
250 operating days. Okay, because I was dividing some numbers, and I didn't use the right number, I don't think.
Okay. Trip breakdown per distance. This is to give you an idea of how far each trip would extend. 0 to 4 miles from origin to destination represent almost 50% of the total number of trips. 42% are between 4 and 8 miles in length. 9% is from 8 to 12 miles, and in excess of 12 miles is only 1%.
So can we, oh, never mind, next slide, there it is.
If we look at inside and outside the city, I want to take a moment.
Bob, what does
here.
that mean? Sun City West and Sun City?
This could mean, yes, Sun City West. It could mean Sun City. It could be, it's typically to the two medical complexes that we have outside the city.
These are trips from Surprise outside the city?
It's from Surprise outside the city or from that facility back to Surprise.
Okay.
So that would be two trips. Those would be two trips.
Well, we don't go to Peoria, do we?
No,
Okay, so just,
I don't believe so. There could be on Bell Road. I don't think we'll extend out to Peoria.
Peoria. There are some Peoria and El Mirage and Youngtown trips that are in that number.
If you look at the
Small percent.
If you look at that, the red section of the pie, that's 8,400 trips. 51% of that, those trips, 51% is going to Del Webb, Sun City West. 40% is going to Boswell, 94th, and Thunderbird in that area. So between the two, there 91% of those trips are to one of those two areas. The other 9% is to other areas.
Now, Bob, when you get dropped off at Boswell, does the driver wait?
Not typically. They'll come back. They'll have another scheduled route, and then they'll have at the time that they call for pickup, they'll be back with another at that appointed time.
So then it's the customer, the rider, that has to call for pickup?
No, that's prearranged. Those are prearranged.
You don't know how long the doctor's
They give you a
gonna
range of
delay.
time. Approximately, it'll be within an hour and a half, that kind of.
is it the same
information.
driver, Bob?
No.
So it could be a different driver?
Could be a different driver, yes. There's not a waiting period there.
So this large number of medical trips are substantially to Del Webb.
There's split between Del Webb and to the Thunderbird and 94th.
But what I'm saying is that this large number of trips that are, for medical purposes, are outside of the city, even if it's across the
Yes.
street.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. Another different, a little different way to look at it in terms of the total number of trips inside the city, the distribution of trips are showing roughly 47% of the riders are using them for shopping. Medical and life support are roughly 20%, and the work trips represent 28%. When you look at outside the city of Surprise, the large majority, which is somewhat suggested on the previous slide, over 70% of the trips are for medical outside the city. There are 23% for work-related trips. What these slides are trying to do is we're trying to get a complexion or a composition of where our riders are using the services and for what purposes. And this is intended to give you that illustration and understanding.
See, the thing is, can we go back to that slide?
Sure.
Bob, again? Shopping has an economic impact on the city of Surprise. So that's taking Surprise workers to places in Surprise where they work is also a benefit to the city. I've talked to some people that they use it all the time to go to work. But outside the city of Surprise, I guess I have a concern about taking people outside the city of Surprise for work. That's just me. The medical is a real big benefit to residents in Surprise. But I'm just trying to think of some priorities here in terms of what we should be charging. You know, and our fare box recovery is what, 5%?
That's the next slide.
Oh, that's the next slide. Okay.
We're going to that
But
next.
how we can equalize the costs so that it makes more sense for us, you know?
Well, there's a couple different things we're looking for from you. That comment is important because we need to determine, is the council interested in limiting the service, in having greater cost recovery, or designating certain trips that will be provided and certain purposes that will not be provided for?
You know, I'm kind of thinking out loud, you know?
Or maybe even thinking about a different price for a different service.
Right.
You know?
That's the other thing.
That's
Yeah.
another sliding scale or whatever.
Bob, the last time we had the gas crisis, and now we seem to have another one. Do you anticipate passenger riders to increase?
On the 571, the express route, we definitely saw that trend.
So there's possibility
We would
that-
expect that on the 571, and I'll show you current and future, actually for the last 2 years, the ridership and what capacity we may have in the 571 route to answer that question.
Okay.
We're also going to see a growth in our passengers that are going to be, as we age, as our parts of our community age, we're going to have more and more passengers that are going to be looking for that.
That's true.
So do we have projections on that?
Not on the, no, we don't. We're looking at the last 2 years in retrospect, and we haven't done any analysis on future trends.
Okay. I think that might be a good thing to have, just to kind of start thinking ahead and trying to figure out, because I don't want to get to a point where we're making decisions and then all of a sudden we drop off the cliff one year because suddenly we have not thought ahead about the aging group of our residents that might be needing the service that don't use it today. I'd like to be able to have a better handle on what it is we need to prepare for.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. The other thing is, earlier, I don't know, 6 months ago, we talked about maybe getting some of the doctors in Sun City West to group.
We've done that.
Like we have a lot of dialysis people. So that was one thing. Are we working on that?
We have done that, and we made contacts. It's harder with dialysis, especially because there isn't a set time that there's an estimate when that patient is going to be ready. But if you're grouping 3 or 4 people, very likely one may have to wait, or 3 may have to wait for the one to finish because they were held over for some purpose. So where possible, doctors have indicated some willingness, but typically the response is that it's very difficult to do. I think with the shopping trips, the internal shopping trips,
You could group those.
they're a little easier to do that in that fashion.
Bob, what is your standard for inconvenience? Meaning if there happens to be one person that has to, 2 or 3 people have to wait for the last person to finish dialysis, what's your definition of inconvenience?
I'm not aware of a standard. Do you have a standard?
Hey, we talking if they have to wait 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
We try not to let them wait for 30.
30
A
minutes.
maximum of 30 minutes.
Good.
Farebox recovery. This again, we're looking at the dial ride service. We are charging the percentage of the recovery is shown in blue, and the red shows what Valley Metro's target goal is. There's a study that was done in 2006, and they developed a lot of targets for recovery rates, operating expenditures per boardings, and that's what the red line or the red bars represent. So as you see, in 08, we were down at 3%. It increased up to 10%, and we're real close to 5% at this point in time.
And why was that, Bob? Because we did nothing with the rate.
No, but if you recall, the 2 lines started to diverge. We started to get less trips and more riders.
So the yield.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
These are figures for, again, the target by Valley Metro for the operating costs. They're system-wide, they're suggesting that transit operators should be falling within these guidelines. And you can see we're real close to that. In fact, in the last year, this fiscal year 11, and that's projected for the year, we've dropped it significantly down from 2010. So we're looking, our stats are very good. We're under the target goal of $29. We're in the area of about $20 right now.
When you talk about operating costs, are you including everything, insurance, driver, maintenance, fleet maintenance, all of those things are lumped into the cost of operating?
All the labor, all the equipment for maintenance, fuel. The insurance, I don't think that's in the equation. I don't believe that's figured in.
Is that changed?
It is?
It is figured in?
Okay, it is complete.
So everything is included in the cost of operating?
You look at the total number of that's shown in our budget, which I'll get to in a second, and you divide that by the number of trips.
Okay.
Now, is that divided by the number of trips or the number of people
it's
boarding?
per boardings, the number of boardings.
So you might have one trip, but you could have 5 boarding.
Right. And that would be 5. That would be 5 trips. So that's 5 boardings.
Yeah, five boardings for the one trip.
Right.
Okay.
This is our fares, and as we talked about earlier, we're at $1. Target is $1.75, but it's very common that within city trips are typically $2 that most other cities are charging right now.
Yeah.
Now, when you go over the, for DART, or if you go farther than the outside the city, you can charge up to, there's no limit, unless you're providing ADA service. Then there's a $3.50 cap on the maximum trip charge.
Yeah.
So if you want to employ a different sliding scale, that's permissible.
See, I don't think, well, this is me again. I don't like charging a differential for handicapped people. That bothers me.
No, what I'm saying is there's no differential. I'm saying we're not obligated to provide ADA service, but we do. But if we choose to charge, just set the rates at whatever level we're not regulated or prohibited from doing that for all customers.
But should a handicapped person board the bus, they're at $3.50 max.
Right.
No, I don't want to confuse the ADA designation with the type of users. It would be for all users. If the decision was to increase the rates, they'd be for all users, regardless of condition.
Have you ever thought about, or in your budgeting process, kind of a radius within the city, outside the city, and so forth, and really determining what the cost of gas is, how much of a tank of gas is used on a certain trip, 12 miles or 3 miles or whatever, and then dictate what the fare box should be in a close radius. It would be relatively small. When you work your way outside, especially leaving the city of Surprise, it should be very substantially increased. Could it be substantially increased?
Later on, I'll talk about the Valley Metro contractor that has provided a bid or really a contract for Valley Metro and any other community within the East Valley, or there's the West Valley communities. And that's exactly the way they price their services. That's on the expense portion. So the trip cost would be based on the length of trip, and it's from certain ranges, so as they fall in those ranges. Now, how you set the pricing structure is a separate question. But yes, you could develop costs that way. There probably could be the same analysis, similar analysis for fee structure.
Right.
Yeah, as an example, to piggyback on Rich's comment, people going from Kilsada Apartments to the 99-cent store, what's that, 3/4 of a mile? But if they're going to the stadium, That's what, 4 miles? 3 miles?
Right.
So maybe there's a way to look at that, you know, on a sliding scale versus the length of the trip, you know?
Well, if they're going to Del Webb, that's one of the farthest medical facilities.
Right, right.
These things,
Or Boswell. Boswell's even further.
We'll move on to the senior center right now, the senior center transit. It's,
Oh, wait a minute. Now, are we going to, I wanted to ask a question if we're going on to this next thing. What about this contractor that's taking care of Sun City West, that's doing cab stuff?
Total transit.
that's the contractor that I alluded to.
Okay.
To do the, that Valley Metro has.
But I've got some very negative feedback on that.
Well, that, we need to look at that closely, because that is one of the considerations if we utilize contracted assistance.
Yeah, okay. We're going to make that decision later, right?
Yes, you'll see some of the numbers, you'll see some opportunities, what the potential cost changes are, so that would be a time to bring that up again.
Okay.
Service for the senior centers. It's seniors without access to transportation are picked up in the morning and in the afternoon. The fares are $1.50 each trip, and it's the primary facility. There's two major, the meal program and then the health and recreational offerings, and along with social activities.
I got 50 cents.
50 cents per trip.
Okay, I thought it was $1.50, you said. Okay.
And the hours of operation, as I pointed out, they're all volunteer drivers. City's cost is to operate and maintain the vehicles. Their vehicles are provided by an 80-20 grant from ADOT, and that consists of 3 lift-equipped vans and 1 minivan. Typical schedule is, as I pointed out, 5 days a week. Passenger load is between 12 and 15, goes up to 18, a little lighter on Friday, and the number of vans that are used each day are shown. The ridership history for the last 2 years and what's projected for this year, it's dropping down a bit. And I talked to the city manager, and he indicated that there has been a decrease in programming of that facility, which would result in that drop-off from 10 to where we're looking at in this fiscal year.
Can we go back to the history for a minute? We're seeing a drop from 09, 10, and 11. Has there been any analysis to determine why there's been a drop in ridership? Or actually, what it is, it's a attendance at the senior center.
Right, and I think the level of activities have been reduced. The hours of programmed hours have been reduced.
So,
and then there's less people coming to the center as a result.
Okay, so the senior center itself has had to cut back, which is cut back on participation, which is cut back on the ridership. So we're seeing a situation where everything is just multiplying and expanding, or not expanding, but contracting inward, because the less participants you have, again, will create less programs that you provide, and then that, it just kind of collapses on itself. And that's what I'm seeing, and that's what I experienced. As you know, Bob, I used to drive, and we had that happen when we lost most of our drivers, that things just collapsed.
Right.
Because we didn't have enough drivers to get the seniors in, so therefore they had less programs because they didn't have the need for it all because they couldn't get there. So we need to, it's more than just, I think in the senior center area there, it's kind of a revolving or a spiral down effect is what we're seeing. And Thursdays, by the way, that's bingo day.
Bob, if I could help you on this as well. Mike, Mr. Woodard, there's a few other variables to this, and it's not just the reduction of hours of service for the senior center. If you recall, approximately 36 months ago, we also dissolved community initiatives. Mm-hmm. And community initiatives had a tremendous impact on the flow of traffic to that facility. And one of the reasons community initiatives was looked upon is the flow of traffic to that facility. A high majority was a non-resident who was looking for social service help and assistance. And what we saw at the senior center is many of those would take part in our programming. So with the dissolving of the community initiatives department, the participation numbers have declined. And then you should also note, and we should also make note for the mayor and council to understand that the reality of it is that we have also started to offer senior programming at Sierra Montana to attract historically a participant who was coming from a 2 or 3 mile square of the original town site and looking to attract some seniors, active seniors from Traditions, Sun City Grand, and those with specific type programs. So it's a combination of a lot of different things, and it really isn't just tied to the reduction in hours. I just want to make that clear. Okay?
Okay, I wasn't aware of the Sierra Montana. Is that fairly new?
Fairly new and not as popular as we want it to be, but we'll continue to do it because I believe that over the longevity, especially with gas prices and everything else, it's a lot closer to drive to Sierra Montana than it is to the original town site. Yes, but we are programming there.
Mark, what kind of numbers are you getting now?
I'm embarrassed to tell you I've been away for 11 months, so I don't look at those reports every day. But it's not something that it's not a significant number, but it's a number. I can get those to you, though. I will certainly do that with a memo this week. Absolutely. We can do that, too.
This is our express route 571, traveling from our park and ride, new park and ride, to Greenway Road in Dysart. They make a stop. And then the third stop is at First Street in Van Buren, and the final stop is at 18th Ave in Adams. Coming back, it's very similar, but different stops, 18th and Jefferson, Central Station, Greenway and Dysart, and then back out to the park and ride. It's express service, and the city is completely responsible for funding this program. It provides peak time service Monday through Friday with 3 inbound and 3 outbound. And Valley Metro administers the contract, owns the buses, and contracts with Value Trans for bus operations.
We pay by the mile, Bob?
We pay by formula. Is it by mileage and actual incurred expenses?
We have a annual contract.
The contractor is put a price for that per mile, and that's the way it's computed. This is a trip. I think I showed a similar chart to this previously. What this chart is trying to do is really give you the different colored bars. The yellow and the blue represent each year. So if you look at 2009, the curve trend, as we talked about, did ridership peak? Well, it did in 2009 in January, and then it started to tapered off after that. And that was a result of rising gas prices at the time. This year, you'll see the trend, or last 2010, it's been pretty level throughout the year. It stayed right around 148 with a slight decline over the last year.
Bob, does this, let's just take June, for example, 150 average boardings. So is that 75 people in the morning and 75 people back in the afternoon?
Yes, it's a total number for the day.
Okay.
For fiscal year 10, the fare box recovery was 17.8. Cost per boarding was about $8 per board. the average fare was around 1.49. This breakdown shows you the outbound early morning trips, and you'll see each of the colors represent one of the different trips. Early is in gray, the yellow is in the middle trip, and 620, the last trip, is shown in blue, and that is definitely the most popular trip. The average, if you're looking at the average seating, this is for inbound, and I'll show you the outbound. It's roughly 70, for morning trips, it's roughly 72% capacity, if you take a look at all of them, all of the three trips, and it drops down to 67% in the evening. As I mentioned earlier, Valley Metro usually uses 125% before they'll put another bus on a particular route.
That means that people stand up while they're...
100% would be people standing, so they want it a little even over that. So we looked at this, and if you recall last year, we made the recommendation to perhaps look at elimination of one. If you were to eliminate one of those routes in the morning and in the afternoon, what you would see is you would see standing. And as we get back to your question about capacity, do we really want to cut the available capacity of this from, we've got roughly 30% capacity on these lines. We really feel that it will not serve our purpose to really look at cutting all these lines. This is what we have right now. We think, especially if gas prices increase, there's a very strong likelihood that the ridership will increase. So we have capacity there. It may require some people to take a different time than they may prefer, but the capacity is there.
Bob, how many, do we know what the citizenry is that takes the bus? Is it El Mirage? Is it us, Surprise? Or is it... You used to have somebody out there checking IDs, I think, at the initial start of the program. But do you have a handle on it now?
We have, most of these people are getting on. As far as where they're coming from, I'm not sure if we have that data, but many are from Surprise. I think the majority are from Surprise, if not almost all of them.
Do other cities have a transit program such as ours? Does El Mirage have a transit program?
They use
Youngtown.
They have a Grand route that stops, a limited, Grand Limited, so they would use that particular line. If they wanted an express route and they lived in northern parts of El Mirage, they probably would come to utilize this.
Okay.
Residents in the county, in incorporated areas, Sun City, they may be utilizing this too.
Okay.
Do we set the times, or does Valley Metro set the times?
They suggest the times based on their knowledge of transit across the valley, and they'll propose that to us, and generally we accept their recommendations.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if I don't know. The 620 is heavily ridden. Have we found out from our residents whether the other two are convenient, or whether they'd like to have it a little later, closer to 620, or how do we do that? I'm just trying to.
Well, you look for ridership trends. It would be difficult it's not a reservation service.
Right, I know.
So they're going to pick one of the three, and it may vary from time to
I
time.
wonder if we could just do some interception interviews, to find out if, I don't know.
But you're going to get a trend of what's the current user, and it may be constant for a while. It might change too, so I don't know how good that.
There's just such a big difference between the 620 and the other two.
Yes.
That, whatever. Okay.
Bob, what's the capacity of these buses?
36 passengers.
30.
After that, they stand.
Thank you.
Again, this is the afternoon routes coming in. Again, here it's the early route. It's the 4 o'clock is the popular line. Last transit service available to customers is the Route 660, the rural route, Wickenburg. This is the route. It stops at 4 locations, begins at Arrowhead. First stop is at Bell and Village Drive, is Old City Hall. Third stop would be at Sun City West. Fourth would be in Whitman. Fifth would be in the Wickenburg Municipal Complex. And then the West Plaza in Wickenburg. We've just concluded, or not we have, Valley Metro has, and ADOT has had public hearings on that. It was, the last public hearing was at our last Transportation Commission meeting. I don't believe that there was anyone in attendance other than the commission members, but the presentation was made, and they're going to be making a determination whether or not to continue that or to look at cutback or elimination of that route. It's funded, we'll get into that a little later, but it's not funded through the city at all. It's through county, through the Valley Metro Prop 400, and ADOT has a portion of a federal grant that they're using to fund this route.
What's the total cost on that route?
Do you know the total cost of the route? I don't have that information.
Okay, could you get that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. So now we'll step back and look at the funding of all of these programs. The DART program, the Dial Ride expenses are $671,000. The revenues that it generates from the general fund, it's paying the lion's share of that, is $670,000. We do receive some reimbursements from DART and also from Prop 400 in the area of $26,000. So the total budget that you'd see in our adopted budget for this current fiscal year is $697,100. 571, the expenses are $363,000, which also includes $38,000 for park and ride maintenance. The facility that we built, it's our responsibility to provide ongoing maintenance. And also at the end, at the lower end of that column for Route 571, $48,430 is the amount of revenues that are collected by rates that offsets the cost of that to Surprise. So,
Bob, did I hear you say the average rate was $1.49?
I think it was around $1.70 in that area, yes.
Didn't we have this same discussion a couple of years ago or last year when we were looking at the budget?
Last year we talked about perhaps the rates could be increased.
Right.
Yes,
Have you done any research with that? Or
those are fixed by Valley Metro. Is that correct? We're set by, they set the rate. So we're not able to adjust that rate.
Are we at the maximum rate that we can charge?
Yes. Yes, I believe this. Are we at the maximum rate?
Yes.
That's correct. Senior Center Transit, since the volunteer component is a large share of the labor costs, which does not exist here, we're looking at a total cost of $13,000 to operate that entire service.
It's really zero. You got revenue and you got income, or you got revenue.
The revenue
and you got
is only
expenses.
$2,000. That's shown on there. So of that,
we're subsidizing 11.1.
yes,
Okay.
yes. So now we'll get into, the proposed changes that could be made to change either the revenue or the expenditure side of.
Bob, could I ask you one more question?
Yes.
Where does the $15,000 that you referred to that comes back from
ADA?
Where did that show up on here? Was that had to do with Dial-A-Ride?
In the 15,000 would be the it's shown for fiscal year. That is the current budget year, and it's shown as $6,000. It fluctuates from year to year depending on the amount of funding that's available. Going forward, I think we're looking at $15,000 15,000 would be a projection for next year.
Okay, all right.
What do they project that based on what formula?
I'm not sure. The formula is based on what the amount of projection is the allocation by Prop 400. It's really the way that Valley Metro will set up their budget. They'll put so much money towards various programs, and that's one program that they fund, and then they partition it out based on the community share of the total Prop 400 revenues. I think that's the way the allocations work. So one potential change would be to increase the DART services. For every dollar increase, it will generate an additional $22,000 based on current ridership. If the ridership goes up, that would be a slightly higher number. Or if the number is increased to $3 or to $4, you just multiply that by the dollar increase.
Bob, have you guys ever done any research as to the poverty level of the ridership? Is there a are most riders?
We have not surveyed or requested that information yet. But if we get into a subsistence program, that would be the first step in that.
Okay.
Fares to the senior transit program, if we were to change that from 50 cents to $1, it would realize an increase of $2,700 for the entire year.
Is that 50 cents each way?
That's 50 cents per trip. So if we were to increase it to $1 per trip,
Right.
that's the revenue it would generate.
So it would cost a senior $2.
It would cost $2 for a round trip.
Okay.
But see, I think we ought to equalize these rates somehow. A person that takes the dollar ride to Boswell versus somebody that takes it 5 blocks to go shopping just doesn't, they're paying the same rate, doesn't make sense to me. So I think we ought to do the concentric circle idea maybe that Rich was talking about, or something to where there's a normalization of rates, so to speak, or equalization.
So you're looking at something more like the Valley Metro fare structure?
Yeah, something.
And I'm wondering, have you shared all this with Valley Metro, or are we going to be hearing?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
We did review this report with Valley Metro, and they're in the process of compiling their 2010 report. They're still editing that as we speak, so they're a little late in terms of compiling their analysis for all of their routes, but they shared with us, and they looked at our data, and they thought it was in line.
Yeah.
Okay. And are we going to be hearing from them? Are they going to be giving us a direct report on, are they going to present their report to us directly when it starts?
They could. They'd be more than willing to, and that was in the future. If you would like a presentation by Valley Metro to give an overall view of the entire system, they'd be more than happy to come out and do that.
Yeah, I would kind of like to hear from them so that we can kind of compare what they're doing in other places. And, Skip brought up the taxi service that's part of their contract services, and I would like to be able to see if we can't compare, and I'd like to hear, an actual discussion about that taxi service and how. My concern is making sure that we aren't denying trips, but we're preparing for a growth in trips, because I believe it's going to happen. Gas prices are going to have an impact, but so is our aging population. It's going to have an impact. And I just want to make sure that we are prepared to handle that additional trip load, because it's going to happen.
Right.
And the mother-in-law research I've done is people are willing to pay more for the service. I think we just have to have a rationale as to how we arrive at these pricing.
We could do a graduated rate per mile, and then we'd also want to look at some of the other rates in use around the valley and maybe other parts of the country. We could do that and bring that back as part of the analysis as the budget preparation. Route 571, There's potential increases in the contract service provided by Value Trans. The rates, again, as we said, are set by Valley Metro as far as both what we can charge and also what we are responsible for paying the contractor. And the service reduction is not recommended.
Yeah, but Bob, see, somehow we got to weigh in on this. We can't be squeezed both ways. I mean, they can raise the contract on us, but then they can tell us how much we can charge?
That's correct.
That's
the
something
contract that we have with Valley Metro.
Yeah, can't we work with them on that?
That's why we need to get them in front of us.
Yeah,
We need
it's
to
just-
talk
That
about
would be a question.
directly.
Let's work on that. Anyway, okay.
What's in store for us? They have, earlier this year, or late last year, they came before the city and also Peoria and Sun City West to see if we'd be interested in participating with a contract services, as we've talked about. The contract service is now been bid out, and they have also offered what they call a Freedom Grant. The Freedom Grant would yield up to $80,000 per year for fiscal years 12 and 13. I think it caps at $175,000. It would be based on a cost share of 72% of the funding would be met by surprise, and 28 would be a receipt of federal funds through Valley Metro. It's only good if we contract our services. It would not be reimbursable to supplied services.
Yeah, and who's doing this right now, Bob? Sun City, part of Sun City West is doing it, aren't they?
That's my understanding. They were on the fence. I wasn't sure where they were going the last time that.
I'm really concerned about service issues. I really am on this contract service. I've heard some not pretty things.
That is definitely a potential negative to this. So you look at the total cost of providing that service is in the area of, I think it was $670,000.
Bob?
That represents a small piece of that. A little over 10% of the cost would be subsidized by the grant. Now, the grant would go for 2 years, and after they're discussing whether or not to extend the second Freedom Grant. So there may be additional fundings, but not at the same level. It would be a 50-50 share. So there may be more or less funding in the future. That's not for sure. Community Block Grant that was just approved at the last council meeting. One of the categories that was approved was an additional $30,000 funding. I think that's set up for contract services also for low-income customers. So, Councilman Alton, that is where we would be requesting information on income and qualifying those in advance. And those would receive, that's how we would receive funding in that category.
Bob, on the 72% local funding, does any of this take into account fare box revenue?
No, it's just the expense portion of operating the bus.
If we spend $50,000 and we get $50,000 in fare box, it's not going to have any effect on their 28%. If that 50,000 is 72, I'm just throwing a number out there.
I'm not clear on that. The numbers are so far out of whack. We're at 674 versus $30,000 in revenue, so we're not at all close to that.
I'm just concerned that they don't reduce the 72% by whatever fare revenue we might get.
Yeah, I don't think that would be. I don't think that would occur.
And at the same time, in order to get that 28%, we must do the contracted service.
Yes.
So they hold the apple out here and hope you take it.
Little incentive to contract services. That's what it suggested to me. Again, a potential budget change would be the use of the regional contractor to provide DART services. Another direction would be to limit or reduce the services by trip type, distance of the trip, as we talked about, the age for ADA, make special provisions for ADA in terms of the rate structure, and service inside the city. There'd be a certain fee for that and something else beyond. Those are the kind of questions, policy questions, that I was hopeful, and I definitely do. I'm hearing a couple things here. One, the concern over contract-provided services, the capacity. We need additional capacity provisions in our system. And you'd have it in either way, I think. With contracted services, the capacity question would be there. You just increase the size of the contract. There'd be more trips. You wouldn't really have a limit to, unless you put a limit on it, where you'd have some built-in cap if you have your in-house provided service, because you can only service so many customers unless you add resources to that.
Right. It seems to me what I'm hearing is we need to do some analysis of our riders to find out who they are, where they're from, how old they are, what types of trips they take. In order for us to answer this list of service questions and capacity questions, we're really going to need to find out a little bit more about who our audience is or our customers are, so we know how to better serve them. And I'm just wondering if this isn't something that we should take a look at, doing some sort of a survey of our bus riders, hand them out a sheet of paper that they can fill it out while they're taking their little trip, and that'll help us enormously to try to help tailor these services and the capacity issues as we move forward towards a budget question.
Well, we have trip types. The trips are pretty well laid out as far as how they're using our service and the number of them.
Well, but it still would be useful in kind of, I think, including the trip type on that same survey, because now you know a little bit more about who it is that's taking that trip type. And if you know that you're taking a whole group load of senior citizens from Sun Village to a medical trip, then you know how to group them better. So you know a little bit more about your groups and your trip types. So it seems to me that we could garner a whole lot of information by doing a survey, a pretty simple survey, just trying to find out a little bit more about the demographic of the individual rider.
The value of the study would be if we're asking the right questions. So if I could, if age, or let's talk for a minute about what your concern is in terms of the demographic of them. Are you looking for the type of trip,
I just want to know a little bit more generally about who we're serving, because that helps us maybe tailor some of the service issues that we're talking about. Making sure that we know that we're not what we're doing is being fair, and that we're not. For example, I know Skip made the comment that he's concerned about sending a certain number of trips and spending $1, having them only spend $1, and they're going out of town to work. So I think that it helps to know a little bit more about the exact customer that we're serving and be able to compile a better picture of who it is that we are serving, and then we can better develop a fee scale that is more appropriate to that.
I think what we could do is conduct that survey, let you take a look at that before we send that out or begin to poll people on that. And then look at, maybe we're looking at a two-phase process here. First is to, if there is agreement that we continue the services as we currently provide, with the caveat that we want to look at fares in terms of equity, in terms of distance types, right. And then we want to get a better idea of the users, and then look at what a typical profile would be for many of the users. And that may help later decisions as it relates to future programming, and also maybe a reconsider of the rates that we charge.
Oops.
Well, and I think it would be useful that, I mean, we're setting essentially a baseline. If we're going to look out into the future, we're going to plan for the future, we're setting a baseline of who our users are today. Right. And we can also, that can help us project what our users are going to look like in 2 years and 4 years and the like, so that we can better plan for it. Because we know what their age is, we know that they might be getting older, we might know that they might use a different type of trip service. So I just think setting that baseline of data that we need in order to better plan for providing the overall service would be a good thing, and we can use it from year to year as we plan our budget.
Okay.
You know, and maybe we don't go to Peoria.
Right.
Because that distance could be causing denials.
Well, there might be also, we just picked up a fare that we have to travel 10 miles out to pick up. So a maximum distance may be something we want to include in the overall program.
Okay.
I think I did. I think this is valuable, and I think we can now prepare the budget, put in the projections that we're anticipating, and then the next steps for council consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may, before I get some of your answers, I just want to let you know the senior center, the senior programming at Sierra Montana is about 300 to 400. It's a drop-in program, so it's hard to get. Sierra Montana is offering senior programming. You asked the question.
Right.
We're facilitating about 300 to 400 participants from the beginning of the fiscal year, and there is no transportation provided to that facility. Just to kind of give you a benchmark, and then you asked the teen programs. We have about 120 programs, and so far we've served about 14,000 teen visits. So we're doing very well.
How many times a week are those 400 residents being served?
I'll have to get you all that information. I just wanted to give you some raw numbers. You bet.
The next item is discussion regarding the streetscape design guidelines.
Mayor Truitt, members of the City Council. While a lot of the news lately has been on current development activities, please know that a lot of our design team, planners and engineers and so on are working on continuing to brighten the future of the city with certain public infrastructure areas like streetscape. So we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes and a long-range planning with a lot of vision to make sure that when development comes back in earnest, we'll be well served by some great guidelines. So tonight we want to talk briefly about streetscape design guidelines. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly just because we have one other item tonight, but please keep in mind that we're going to be working on this for the next couple of months. So if you see something tonight that you have questions about and you want additional information, please don't hesitate to contact any member of staff at a time in the future, because we are not asking for any particular action from council tonight. So when we talk about streetscape, the goal of this is really to create streets that are great public spaces, not only places for vehicles, but places to walk and to gather. An important part of the strategic plan, if you recall, is to provide multimodalness in the city of Surprise. And the streetscape standards really go in that direction. So we need to create a balance for pedestrians, bikers, public transit, as we just talked about for an hour, and vehicles as well. The other thing is we're trying to create a coordinated and consistent palette. The city has grown in different phases. Sometimes there wasn't a lot of thought put together on how these things all marry together. But if we do a good job in the design guidelines, we'll have a consistent architectural style with good materials and color that complement one another. And we also need to be sure that we're flexible with this palette, because it could be a very urban application in different parts of the city, like the photo on the left. But there are areas where the streetscape may be very, very residential in nature with very low density, particularly north of I-74 when we get in that direction. So we need to keep in mind that there is some flexibility that's necessary. Let me also point out this has been a project that has a lot of stakeholder involvement, not only Public Works, but community development. We've also had great participation from the Home Builders Association. And I also want to stress to you that we will be taking this draft proposal to the Transportation Commission within the next couple of weeks to get their feedback as well. So what will these guidelines do? They'll differentiate between the road and the street. This image does a really good job of showing how the street really needs to be shared. You can see here a bicyclist, you can see pedestrians, obviously single passenger vehicles, and even transit, and everybody has a place to be in a safe way and it's very understandable and predictable for everybody to see where they're going to need to be. Streetscape composition also includes other factors we wouldn't normally think of, whether it's street furniture, lighting, signage, even public art are in our public spaces. So please don't forget about that as we develop these design guidelines. And the other thing, if you think about some of the subdivisions in the city, some of them are areas where we actually do a really good job already. Here's Marley Park. You can see where there's a clear division between the roadway and the bike path, for example. Also very important signage to make sure that pedestrians know where to go. Good landscaping as a buffer between the vehicle and the pedestrian, and also good areas for people to walk and recreate and travel from one place to another. Marley Park is one of the few subdivisions in the city where frequently you will see people walking around the neighborhood to the grocery store, to the bank, to the recreation center, to other neighbors. So I think we need to keep doing this with good streetscape design.
Jeff, are we, on the bike path piece, are we doing, we have a bike path plan that
We do.
that throughout the city?
Yes, we do.
And so when new developments come to us, we talk to them about how they can interface with that plan and be more holistic about how we move around the entire city on a bike?
We do that, but not only that, we make sure that when they're proposing their plans and showing the roadways that they're going to build, that if a bike path is not shown in the plan, we'll actually reject them because they're not consistent with the long-range plans.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
That's probably one of the biggest questions I get asked all the time is why don't we do more with bike paths in our development? So it's great.
Very good. Also in commercial areas, I think the city in some respects is leading by example. Here's Civic Center Drive, actually directly behind us here. I think the city's done a great job showing here, again, sidewalk, on-street parking, bike path, roadway, and a median. Again, it's a generous amount of right-of-way, but at the same time it shows, again, where everybody can go, parking, ride the bike, and also some good landscaping features. These are the kind of things that create a good sense of place in a community and make it more interesting for economic development, candidly. So let me give you a couple examples, and then I'll take questions. So here's an example of the area right in front of Stadium Village, how it looks now. And if we implement the design guidelines, if we've contemplated them to date, this is how it could transform over time. And that's what it could look like. Notice the zero lot line, creating a nice definable street line or street wall along the sidewalk. There's good places for people to park, places for people to walk, generous landscaping, and places for signage. Here's another example. This one's a little bit better. This is an example where it's really not about parking or buildings and so forth. This is a bland, everyday street that doesn't create any sense of place whatsoever. But with some really good design guidelines and a developer willing to work with us or the city deciding to expend money on this, we can go from this kind of street to this kind of street. Again, it makes it much more homey, more comfortable. The lighting, the street lights, the landscaping really creates a better sense of place. Here's the final example. I like this one. Vamshi actually designed this. He did a particularly nice job showing this is Grand Avenue. This clearly was developed many, many years ago where drainage was clearly important and so was safety between the pedestrian and the motorist. But again, with landscaping. I'm sorry, Bell Road. Thank you. Apologize. But with some forethought, good design guidelines, we can go from this to this. Again, it's not that far-fetched. All it takes is, again, good guidelines, willing developer, time, and money. So as I'm presenting this to you, please keep in mind, so Bob and Scott don't get mad at me, this isn't something we're going to do tomorrow. But when development does come back, if we set our expectation very high, then these are the kind of things that we can hope for in the future. So future actions, again, this will go to the Transportation Commission in March. We'll take it to the Planning and Zoning Commission and get their feedback in April, and then hopefully we'll bring it back here to City Council. But again, at any point between now and May, any questions, comments, research that you have, please let us know, because we want to make sure that these guidelines meet the expectations of the strategic plan that you just adopted and all of your expectations as well. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, Councilor?
Okay. Thank you very much.
And the third presentation is discussion and demonstration of the use of portable electronic devices to pull up council agendas before, during, and after a meeting.
Them damn things.
Thank you. Mayor and members of the City Council.
I wanted to present to you tonight a project that was suggested by Skip Hall, and I think Mr. Woodard asked Sherry about the possibility of having electronic agendas. And I wanted to make sure that you know that we've been able to have electronic agendas for probably 2 to 3 years using laptops or even desktops, because we've had our agendas online even for the public. But what I wanted to show you today is the possibility of using smaller devices, netbooks and iPads that you could be looking at up at your seats up there, and even the public can be using the same kind of technology. Nothing is proprietary here, nothing is special that we've developed. I'm going to be demonstrating on the screens how it would look for using a netbook, and then I think Terry's going to let you pass around an iPad that's set up to have the agenda on it, so you can look at how it looks. They both work pretty much the same, and I'm going to show you the ability to bring up an agenda and the ability to annotate it. For instance, if you have a question of a 55-page contract, and in the 30th page on line 22 you have a question, I'm going to show you how you could annotate it so you could go directly to it, you could save it on your desktop and be able to recall that during the meeting to be able to ask that question and have the reference right there at your hands. So right now I'm going to, can you hear me okay? Because I'm going to have to get away from the microphone a little bit. This is the agenda page that is available to you and to everybody in the public. And I'm going to scroll up a little, and you can see that we have the next several agendas on here. And in this case, I've got tonight's agenda, which is the council meeting right here. So I'm going to call this up. And this is tonight's agenda after we finish the work session. And if you wanted to drill down into it, let me go down a little bit. Let's look at this item from economic development on the neighborhood stabilization program. And I think some of you are pretty knowledgeable about how this works. But I'm going to go down, and this is a staff report. This is a PDF document with the staff report. And I'm going to bring it up as soon as it loads. And this has come into some annotation software. And I haven't bought it yet, so. With the software, you can annotate it in a way that I was describing. For instance, let's go down here and say on, I get too far. Oh, I'm already on page 2. Let's say that you had a question on these 82 eligible families, and you wanted to see if that was really a number that you wanted to deal with. So you can circle it there. You can drop in a check mark or a question mark, a stamp here. Let's just stamp it that we've got a question here. Move it here. So we've got this in here. And then you may want to underline, for instance, is it really 10% of the funds that we want to watch? So you've got that there. So we've highlighted that. So you can, you would have that, and you could save this, like I said, to the desktop and be able to use it. So let's go back up to the top of the page. And if this was a great big long document, for instance, you could jump down and let's go to, that isn't it. the next page with annotations, and it'll jump right down to that page that you've done, even if it's 55 pages. So that makes it real easy to utilize this. The advantages to the netbook and the iPad, first of all, is that they're small. They're easily portable. They can get the information very readily and almost real time. However, if you annotate a PDF several days ahead, it could have been updated after that. So you've got to be cognizant of that. We've handed out a document. I hope. Did they get a document? Okay. Handed out a document working with Terry Lowe and the Sustainability Division, and showing that this could be very financially viable, even with the cost of the equipment. And they're looking at a return on investment of less than a year. That is presuming that there's widespread adoption. If most everybody doesn't adopt it and we just buy several devices, there's just going to be costs associated with it. But we can save considerable amounts of money and over what we do now of making those big books. There's a lot of money that we've spent on that. And you have some details on that. I'm not going to go into too much. You have that information, and the public has that. I put it out on the table in back for them to have that too. We're coming before you to say that we would like to start a pilot project with several of the elected officials volunteering to get some of these devices, and several of the staff people, Mr. Coronado and Mr. Bailey, have indicated an interest in having those and try using those. There is a cost to the departments. The internal staff would be funded out of departmental funds, and the council would be out of your discretionary funds. The costs are anywhere from about $500 for the iPad, for a very low-level iPad, to about $700 for the netbook, which is a little bit more expensive. So we can certainly have that and save some money. The reason we want to have a pilot project is that we need to develop the policies. This will be a city-owned device. We'll need to bring in some software to manage that device so that we can push out the applications and that we can make sure it has encryption and antivirus all up to date in it. So that's kind of the demonstration of it. I can show you more. I can answer your questions.
Randy?
Yes.
Can these be used at home? In other words, like now we get our book delivered to us at home, and that gives us a week to read it. Would this automatically, if we had this iPad, would it automatically download at home?
Absolutely. The way I've got this netbook set up that I'm demonstrating with is like it's on the outside. It's just like at home. I'm not connected to an internal network at all. So the answer is yes, you would have that information available at all times. And it's using our standard distribution for agendas that's available to you and to the public before each meeting.
Mayor and Council, and well, I think the important piece of this, it's a sustainability program. There is a savings. It pays for itself after 8 to 11 months. I mean, it has a sustainable piece that will be endorsed and managed by our sustainability manager, Terry Lowe. So there is a cost up front, but over time, this will be paid back, and it's one of the initiatives you have asked us all to venture into. So that's why we're doing it.
Scroll through the agenda item you have. Randy,
Just a quick comment.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, through the chair. Sorry, Mayor. I've been using this for about 5 months now up on the dais, and I strongly urge you to move forward with a pilot. You know, we're always uncomfortable with technology initially. You know, the typewriter transition to a word processor, transition to a computer, and so there's certainly a training and a learning curve there. But I've been using this, and it's just click away, click away. The agendas have been available via the internet. You can get them at home. We can all get them from home anyway. Right. And I think over the long term, when we get comfortable and accustomed to that process, that's something that can, in fact, as Terry Lowe has calculated, can save us money.
And Mayor and Council, we've tried this in the past because it has been available for quite a while. But we would like to try to embrace it this time, because we're not going to save the monies unless we move in this direction.
Right.
Which speaks to the question of the pilot project. If you're not doing it for the entire council, then are you able to access the full price savings?
Councilman Walcott and through the mayor, the reason we need the pilot project is mainly to get in place the policies, and we just need a couple more weeks to do that. And the pilot, if it's supported, could move very fast. There's no development to do this. This is ready to go. It just matters with getting people to want it and to buy the hardware of your choice, and once we have those policies in place.
Personally, until you showed me how you can highlight and annotate, I was not interested. But now I see this, because I'm a big note taker. I go with my little yellow pens and my pink pens, and I annotate everything. So to me, this is amazing that I could do this without having to fish through all this paper. Now, this thing weighs about 5 pounds. That's pretty heavy. Is this the kind of thing that we would have?
That has a ruggedized case on it. I know I have a much lighter case, like the one you buy from the Apple store. That's much smaller, and this case on this device, I'm gonna shut this down just so I can hold this up.
It's a little heavy.
This already comes with a ruggedized case, pretty much. So I mean, it's about 3 pounds. If you want, you can pass this around too.
Sure.
I think it's a little lighter.
Randy, how about we set up a training session?
We can work with you on how to do this, certainly.
I know Goodyear uses this, and they really, really like it. So it's really helpful for them.
Not much.
It's about the same.
Randy, if you're looking for the least technologically advanced person in you, I'll volunteer, because I'll tell you, I'm just not, right now anyway, I'm not real favorable.
Strap on it.
But, you know, as Councilman Alton said last week, I can be swayed.
We'll certainly work with you. I mean, you know our reputation. We'll walk you through these things. This will work. This will work. I mean, not just you. We've helped everybody with this, and we'll continue to do that. If you don't have any more questions, that's all I had. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. No further questions. This meeting is adjourned.
You're out of here.